Hey everyone, and welcome to the 700 Club. I'm Andrew Knox in for Gordon today. More than 3,000 U.S. Marines arrived in the Middle East this week. Their mission to help deter Iran from seizing and interfering with merchant ships in the Strait of Hormuz.
The troop deployment is part of a growing U.S. military presence in the region. And after 2 years of attempts at diplomacy, the Biden administration is now making a strong show of force. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke reports.
While the U.S. may not be directly involved in any major regional conflict, tensions with Iran are only increasing. The Islamic regime continues to launch attacks on a key shipping route, in addition to ramping up its nuclear program. Escalations that now demand a renewed American presence in the region.
The best way to avoid war is strength. Reagan said it best, peace through strength.
Thousands of Marines, backed by U.S. fighter jets and warships, are deploying to the Persian Gulf, a display of military might that's long overdue, according to Nathan Sales, former ambassador-at-large and coordinator for counterterrorism in the Trump administration.
What Iran has seen so far from the administration is one after another episodes of turning the other cheek. That's a great way to live your life as a private citizen and as a Christian. That's not a great way to run foreign policy.
The latest slap involves the regime increasing its pattern of harassing and seizing ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway that more than 20% of the world's oil must pass through. With Iran now closer than ever to weapons-grade uranium levels, the Biden administration has finally admitted efforts to revive a nuclear deal are done, and that option is no longer on the table.
I think the important question for us to be asking the White House is, what took you so long? It's not as if Iran has been dramatically worsening its behavior lately. This is all par for the course. We've looked the other way for a good 2.5 years.
Along with this military show of force, Gabriel Nerona, former State Department special advisor for Iran, says the administration is still offering Iran concessions, giving the regime an impression that it holds the leverage in nuclear negotiations.
The State Department is still trying to negotiate something where they give sanctions relief to Iran in exchange for Iran pausing its enrichment or doing a little bit less there.
Nerona tells CBN News that while China may be the administration's top priority, the U.S. response to Iran could make a major difference in how Beijing moves forward.
If the United States sets a red line over Iranian nuclear activity, that better be something that we're willing to actually enforce, because the results, if we don't enforce that red line, could be a completely green light to China to go and invade Taiwan.
Since the beginning of the year, we've also seen an increase in joint military exercises between the U.S. and Israel. Nerona and Ambassador Sales believe this sends a message of unity and support to allies in the region, while hopefully enabling them to step out and take on a larger role themselves. Andrew?
Caitlin, thanks for reporting on this. What about this situation in particular? How serious is this situation in the Strait of Hormuz right now?
Andrew, since 2019, there have been a series of attacks on shipping vessels traveling in the Strait of Hormuz. And with such a large U.S. presence there now, the problem clearly isn't getting better. In response to the military buildup in the Persian Gulf, Iran has basically told the U.S. to mind its own business. But you have to remember that we have an interest there. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most important oil shipping route. Ships have to pass through there to get oil out of the Middle East, and about 17 million barrels a day go through. So ultimately, that accounts for 20 to 30% of the world's oil consumption. Along with sending the 3,000 soldiers to the Gulf that are there now, the White House is also talking about putting armed sailors and merchant marines on commercial ships. So this is definitely something that is being taken seriously.
Yeah, different approach by the administration. And they tried to bring back the Iran nuclear deal, as your report mentioned. That failed. Is it possible that Iran could already have a nuclear weapon?
Well, we know that diplomatic efforts are ongoing in some way, but according to a recent U.S. intelligence report, no, Iran is not believed to currently be pursuing nuclear weapons, but they have ramped up activities that could help in developing them. So basically, according to U.S. intelligence, they have stopped just short of crossing that line for now. Andrew?
All right. Caitlin, thanks so much for being with us today. In other news, Ukraine claims it foiled a plot to assassinate President Zelensky. Ephraim Graham has that story and a lot more from the CBN newsroom. Ephraim?
Andrew, Ukrainian security services arrested a woman they say spied for Russia, charging she was caught handing over information to Russian forces. Investigators say she was gathering information on Ukraine's president's travel plans to a city where the Russians would then have ordered an airstrike to kill him. Meanwhile, here at home, American support for Ukraine may be declining. A CNN poll suggests 55% of Americans do not want Congress to authorize more funding for Ukraine in its war with Russia, while 45% think Congress should go ahead with more money. Ohio voters head to the polls today for a special election that could impact abortion in the state. Issue 1 is a ballot measure that makes it harder to approve an amendment to the state's constitution by raising the current requirement from a simple majority of voters to 60% of ballots cast. Opponents charge the special election is aimed at a November referendum on a constitutional amendment guaranteeing access to abortion in Ohio. Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, the pro-life community has mobilized its efforts across the board. As CBN's Charlene Aaron tells us, one impact is to fuel new trends in adoption among evangelicals.
Before the historic court action, statistics showed Christians already more likely to adopt than other Americans. Now they are stepping up at an even bigger rate to grow their families and help children in need.
Since Dobbs' decision last June, we've definitely seen the church raise up and say we want to be available for adoption and foster care.
Herbie Newell serves as president and executive director of Lifeline Children's Services, one of the largest evangelical adoption agencies in the country.
We've seen the pro-life community really embrace the idea of adoption in ways that really we haven't for the last 49 years. I feel like we were so targeted on ending abortion that we kind of failed at times to look at what are the options that a woman has on the life side.
This all comes at a time, Newell says, the battle over adoption has never been greater.
Adoption has become a lot tougher, both domestically and internationally. Organizations have either compromised or exited child welfare altogether because of how difficult it is to stand firm to a biblical ethic of marriage and family in the world of child welfare today.
When the pandemic hit in 2020, border closings and lockdowns forced many countries to shut down their foreign adoption programs, an impact Newell points out that's still being felt today.
China has just now started to allow families to travel again for kids that were matched to them in 2019 before the pandemic began. And so certainly we need to call our state representatives, our senators. We need to advocate for these kids that have been matched to come home.
Back in the U.S., Newell says pro-life pregnancy centers must adjust to the changing face of abortion.
We need to make sure is that we're not just reaching the woman who's going to come into our clinic who's looking for a medical abortion, but they were able to get in almost real time connection with women who are seeking chemical abortion. And we need women to know that there's a reversal pill. This is really the face of crisis pregnancy, and it means that we're having to revolutionize the way that we look at reaching young women who are in that crisis.
That includes single women facing an unplanned pregnancy.
What that woman needs is not an abortion. That woman needs a community that's going to mentally and spiritually support her, wrap around her, and help her be able to accomplish her goals and her dreams while also bringing life to a child.
Meanwhile, Lifeline is recruiting kids to help make a difference through an initiative called Stand for Orphans, an idea started by kids for kids who need families.
And my son, who was about 8 or 9 at the time, said, you know what, Dad, if we could get 1,000 kids to do lemonade stands, the $20 we made yesterday would turn into $20,000. The next thing you knew, that first summer, they had raised over $100,000 for orphans and vulnerable children around the world.
I took a stand, and you can too.
Since that first summer, nearly $400,000 have been raised, and it's expanding as churches across the country are including the idea in their vacation Bible schools. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
And a child shall lead them. Andrew?
Thank you, Ephraim. Such an important story, and community support is so vital to make a difference in the pro-life community and having credibility, too. Being ambassadors for the Lord and caring for, think of how many orphans are going to be blessed by this. Thank you for that report.